It's time for another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas, the podcast covering the intersection of business, culture, entrepreneurship, and life in general here in the Ozarks. Whether you are considering a move to this area or trying to learn more about the place you call home, we've got something special for you. Here's our host, Randy Wilburn.
Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn. I'm excited to be with you as always. I'm here at the KUAF radio station. You know, it's the only public radio station here in Northwest Arkansas, and 91.3 FM. Certainly want to encourage you to check it out. They have partnered with us here at I Am Northwest Arkansas for over a year now. I can't believe that. It's been more than that, but it's been great to partner up with something that I've grown up with my whole life, which is public radio. And so I'm excited to be able to produce and do my podcast right out of this wonderful station and the beautiful people that are here. I'm actually using Matthew Moore's office today, and Matthew was kind enough to share his office with me. And so I'm excited to be able to have this next guest on the podcast. And, you know, one of the things that I always say about Northwest Arkansas is that just give it a moment and you'll meet somebody new that's cool, that's innovative, that's doing some unique things, or you'll just meet somebody that you like, you know? And so this individual is a little bit of both. And we actually got connected through the 1 Million Cups event in Bentonville that I spoke at. It was my second time speaking at the 1 Million Cups event. Shout out to Startup Junkie, who hosts that event in Bentonville every Wednesday morning. It's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to refine their pitch, to tell their story. And I basically just came and told my story. And so I got a chance to meet a gentleman named Justin Johnson, who is one of the founders of Square 6. And I'm going to let him talk a little bit about Square 6 and who they are and why they're important. But it was just Justin and I got a chance to sit down for some coffee and talk about what he's doing in his little neck of the world. And Square 6 is a fabulous organization that's based out of Siloam Springs. But they have folks that live throughout Northwest Arkansas that are part of this team. And I thought it would be great to get Justin on the podcast to talk a little bit about the work that he's doing. But without further ado, I want to welcome Justin Johnson to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. It certainly is an honor. And I'm glad that my efforts to participate in that 1 Million Cups brought about this event right here. So I'm very thankful for the serendipity that is Northwest Arkansas and the ecosystem that we're in.
Yeah, I agree. It's a great event. Like anytime I go, I never fail to meet somebody interesting and engaging to just kind of hang out with and talk. Like you said, get coffee. It's so easy to connect with people in this area. And that's a great way to do it. I thoroughly enjoy that.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself and Square 6.
Yeah, I'll start with me. I was kind of formally trained as a graphic designer. So that's where I started my journey, and out of college got into printing and did a stint there for a while, which was really fun, being able to kind of spin up projects for people out of kind of thin air. And it was really fun and creative. It was a good start. Quickly went to an outdoor company, which was really rewarding for me, especially being in this area. I grew up in the outdoors, loved the outdoors. So being able to kind of do my craft in the outdoors was great. And then from there went to JB Hunt. And so that was kind of where I started my UX career. I made the leap from marketing and to UX at JB Hunt. And then after JB Hunt is where we started Square 6. So there's two other founders, and I can kind of go through their story if you want me to.
Yeah. So, and I love acronyms. I want to make sure everybody knows UX stands for user experience, right?
Yes, user experience design. I'll elaborate on that. I was in marketing, so traditional marketing as a graphic designer, and then kind of coming up through that world, which is really fun with all the branding and different ways to reach out to people, a little bit of psychology, but UX is really focused on stereotypically around technology, but user experience is everything. The podcasts we're doing, the mics we're using, the interfaces we use. So it's really just a user's experience with something, but typically gets tied to technology, which is the same in my case.
Well, and you think about it too, unfortunately, a lot of people put that on the back burner when it comes to experiencing specifically technology. And I'm just thinking about how certain apps go viral and certain apps just lay dormant.
Yeah,
that's the easiest way to put it, right? You think about it. And so it's like, you wonder, well, what is it about an app like TikTok that just makes it hard to put down? I think some of it is ease of use. Some of it is the way that all of the functionality is laid out for you physically. So as you view it, it makes a huge difference. And there is an art to that.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Yeah, there is very much. It's, art and science, like any good field. There's an art to it, and then there's a science to it, which is what I really enjoy, is just trying to figure out how humans interact with technology is endlessly fascinating.
Sure.
There's so many interactions. And to your point, a saying that I've heard that I think is really, really good is the best UX you never notice.
Right.
The best user experience you never notice, because there's nothing to notice. Everything works the way you think it should, and it's where you think it should. And we get that request a lot is, well, just make it intuitive. And I wish there was a button on the keyboard to just hit for intuitive. Yeah. But instead it comes through hours and hours of research and setting
practice.
with users. Yeah. Setting with people that are the end user of your product, figuring out how their mental models work. Like, what are they thinking of in their workflows? Just like TikTok, what are people wanting? And it's all over the board. It's also the technology. There's a lot of user experience that goes into how fast something loads or what shows up first or what the interactions are. So it's really fun. It's a fun space to explore.
No, that's awesome. So you started out, you were at JB Hunt for a while. How long were you there?
About 2 years.
Okay. All right. So you got a bit of experience there before you decided to step out on your own. Had you owned a business before?
No, never owned a business. Yeah.
So why all of a sudden did you decide to put the entrepreneur cape on?
Yeah. I'll say it's probably more so the other two founders. So to back up a little bit, me and the other two founders are Blake and Chris, Blake Davidson and Chris Gulstad.
Okay.
And so me and Blake met probably 10 years ago, and he was a developer and I was a designer. And in that time I was, doing traditional design, marketing, that kind of stuff. But we quickly realized we had complementary skills. He was like, you can design stuff, I can build stuff. So it was then when I probably started really getting into technology, where I'd met him and I could see what a developer could do, which I thought was fascinating, because at that time, everything I made was typically just a static image. It wasn't anything you could hold or be tangible, or maybe a video at best. And to meet him, it's like, oh, we could solve problems together. You can make things happen and call down information. It was just this whole new world for me. So it was really fun to explore with him and do a lot of freelance projects. And he would always kind of coaxing me like, hey, you should get into technology. You should. And at the time, I was having the best time of my life. I got to travel around and do documentary films. That was probably the highlight of getting to produce and direct these. I would go and tell stories. And I know you're big on storytelling.
Absolutely.
And it was really my first love, past marketing. It was like, there was all these traditional marketing avenues. And then it was like, you could just find someone and tell their story, and it compels people to be bought into that product. And so that's what I got to do, is kind of imagine a Yeti style documentary. They really kind of were the first ones to be like, okay, the product's in here, but we're really telling a story about someone else. And so I took that approach. And so I would get to go talk to people, all across the country. So I got to travel, which was another thing that was really, really in my wheelhouse and that I loved. So I'd travel somewhere, get to interview somebody, just kind of like what we're doing here, and just get to know them, and then get to go shoot all the video to support their story. And it was a beautiful thing, because you got to tell people's family stories. And by the end of that shoot, you were friends. You got to know them. You'd captured their whole story. And then whenever you'd put it out, they often get messages from the family and just say, hey, we'll have this forever, And so that was really cool. And so it was a hard sell for Blake to get me to come to the technology side. But the more we worked together, the more I was like, man, this is fascinating. And it was really kind of different than what I was used to in marketing. There's all kinds of different ways to do marketing, but this felt like more, instead of trying to sell product, you're really like, once I dug into UX, and it was like, your only goal is the user's experience and to do everything you can to facilitate a good experience for them. Yeah. I thought, man, intrinsically that feels so right. And so on a deep level, I really connected with UX. And that's when he said, got this opportunity at JB Hunt, come talk to these guys. And I did. And then it was just, it was really a whirlwind after that. And then I got in there, and it was enterprise, very complicated problems, which was really rewarding. And getting to work with truck drivers was really awesome. And so that was kind of my genesis into UX. And then I've been kind of just encompassed by it ever since. And so, it's been really fun.
And I mean, I guess, did you always have an inclination for entrepreneurship, or was that something more that you just kind of, you feel like you fell into it more than anything?
Yeah, felt like I fell into it, was dragged along with it maybe. So Chris is the third founder. And so me and him actually worked together at a previous job, and me and Blake approached him about a project. So we got to talking, and it was over a lot of beers and pizza that we finally said, hey, that project's not going to work out, but what if we started a company together? And that was really the first time I'd ever thought about it. And it was, we would just meet and talk and dream. And then eventually one day we quit our jobs and did it. And it was just kind of like jumping off a cliff. Yeah.
So how many years has Square Six been in existence?
A little over 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we started in 21. So right after COVID, which was a
perfect
wild
timing.
Time. Oh, yeah. Wild time. In hindsight, I'm like, what in the world?
Right.
But it seemed like such a great idea at the time. Yeah. And so that was it.
So tell us a little bit about Square Six and the problems you're solving and who they're for.
Yeah. So UX is a big part of that story. So I think Blake, as a developer, had been in a lot of situations where, just like you said, UX was not considered. And so what we've seen a lot of, or I've seen a lot of, is kind of just you have a problem and you just throw development at it, without any kind of consideration. And that has a lot of problems for a lot of reasons. And so one of the core pillars of Square Six is UX and the research that goes along with that. And that's something that Blake identified. And he'd seen at other jobs where they would just churn and churn and churn on trying to develop something. And the goal was to get something out, but nobody had ever talked to the person they were going to get it out to. And then so the project would get done and go to that person and it wouldn't work. And then it was the developer's fault. And the developer's like, I never wanted to design this. I'm looking to build these things. And so that symbiotic relationship with UX and development was something that really stuck in his head and he saw was successful, which is why I'm here and which is why we started that. And then Chris has kind of the business experience. So I think that's another part of the agency that not all software development gets is he was, 20 years of business experience. And so he has that whole concept of like how to generate revenue or whatever those business models. And then we both come from marketing. So it's like one of the unique angles for us is like, and we've done this with projects, is you literally don't have anything. You don't have a logo all the way to you now have a native mobile app with a marketplace. And we did all the branding and then we actually built the technology and then we come up with the business plan and then the marketing plan. And it's just this full 0 to 1. So that's really fun to be able to have those skill sets all come together. And that's some of the problems that we're solving that are outside of, I just need this built. It's really, and so another part of Square Six is partnering with people.
Yeah.
So Blake also has seen a lot of what he calls churn and burn. So he'd work at agencies, they'd bring a project in, work on it, and then they put it out. And you just never got to see it again. And so that was one thing that he did not like. And so when we were all talking about what is Square Six, what's it going to be? It's going to be people first, whether that's UX and thinking about how a person uses any product that we do, all the way to the business owner that we partner with. And so, internal product. So we build our own products too. And that's something that we're focused on. So that's really, if I had to shorten it way down, is what Square Six is about is everything from solving problems for other people, but that we partner with. And then it's not just a contractual thing, but it's, hey, we want to work together for the next 10 years. And I think that's something that's a nice conversation to have with people when they say, hey, I got this idea or I need this thing built. It's like, this never stops. Technology never stops. You build something, and then especially in like the UX realm, you iterate and you iterate, and that's how you stay ahead. Like the Googles and Facebooks of the world are what kind of really fleshed out UX and made it such a valuable thing, because it's like, if you focus on that user experience, you will keep that person. And if you don't, somebody else will.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of that.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. I mean, I try to do it from a continuity perspective with the storytelling that I do on this podcast. I try to show up every week and bring really interesting and entertaining stories, sometimes, a variety of them. Mm-hmm. And because, variety adds a spice of life, as they say, and try to share the storytelling platform with as many people as possible, because I think we're moved in everything that we do by the stories that we hear.
Yep.
And it makes a huge difference. I'd be curious to know, do you sometimes enter into what we would maybe call joint venture agreements with some of your clients, where they say, hey, I have this idea, I want to go here being like, A, B, C, D. They want to get to D, but they only know how to get to B. But you can take them to C, to D, and then on beyond that. Do you find in this current environment that we're in that people are open to partnering up like that, as opposed to just saying, oh, this is my baby and I can't give it to anybody because I don't want anybody to take it from me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there is a lot of collaboration, and that is something that we're open to. That is not so, like I said, we're people first. So when the right person comes along, I think that's where Chris gets involved and does all the gymnastics to make it work, but it's exactly like what you're talking about. So whether that's a business that comes to us and says, hey, I found a pain point in my business that I need to solve, and we go solve that. And then we say, I wonder if other people in your industry also need to solve that. And it turns into a SaaS product, all the way to somebody's like, I just have a dream. I have this idea and I've seen this opportunity, and a lot of times they'll be looking at, what does that cost? And that conversation usually leads to some kind of partnership. And we're open to any kind of, partnership, whatever that looks like. And it's really based on the person, and the idea. So
that means you constantly are having to vet and dissect opportunities all the time.
Lots, yeah.
Because I know you also shared with me, and I know that there's some projects that you're working on that you can't really talk about. Could you give our audience maybe an idea of some of the problems that you're solving for clients where you can talk about it?
Yeah.
And just kind of walk us through what that looks like. And the reason why I'm asking is because I know that we have a subset of our audience that are practitioners that are kind of in the dirt, if you will, doing things on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And some of the information that you're sharing today is really valuable for them as they are doing the work that they're doing. Yep. And I know that's one of the reasons why I like listening to podcasts, because sometimes you can get people to really break down and dissect exactly what's going on. And in doing that, you're able to find, maybe the through line on a project or an issue that you're working on that just resonates with you because that person's kind of going through the same thing, and you're able to kind of gain some insight based on what they're doing or the problem that they've solved. And now you can go off and solve your problem. So that's a long way of me saying that I'd love for you just to kind of share and unpack a little bit of what you're doing specifically so that some of our listeners could really benefit from that.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories to tell is the project that we have going on with Ricky Williams. First of all, just because he's an amazing guy.
The Ricky Williams. Let's be clear now. So when you say Ricky Williams, it's, I know some people come to mind, well, who is Ricky Williams, right? And then you think, wait, you mean the running back from the University of Texas?
Yeah,
you mean the running back from the New Orleans Saints that Mike Ditka famously, spent the whole kit and caboodle to bring him to the team? You mean the Ricky Williams that, he's just kind of been around and an elder statesman? The Ricky Williams that's won a Heisman Trophy.
Heisman winner, yeah.
Yeah, so that Ricky Williams.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now that we've set it up, let's go from there.
Yeah, that's a great setup. Yeah, he is all of those things and just a great human being. And so I think that's why I get really excited to tell his story, is because it's been one of the first projects that we started on. So we've been working together for about 3 years now. And the way it started was he connected with Blake, or somebody on his team connected with Blake on the internet. And they had, because
that happens all the time.
Yeah, it's a big world out there. And so like a lot of people know his story and going through the NFL. And once he left that, he kind of went on this big spiritual journey, which is a really interesting story. And astrology was one of the things that really helped him to kind of work through his life and things like that. And so he had an idea, and he had a new way of doing astrology, and he had worked with an astrologer, and now he's an astrologer. But they had an idea, just like a lot of people do. And they thought, man, we have something that we think is really valuable and we want to get it out to the world. And the best way that they thought that was possible was a mobile app. So that was the genesis of his story and where it kind of started. And he went offshore in the beginning. And so he went offshore and then did a lot of work, spent a lot of money, and then just wasn't happy. His ideas weren't being able to get executed, or whatever ideas he had didn't include UX, right? So it was just like, hey, I want to do this. And then they would just do that, which is pretty regular, like without any kind of vision or any kind of like way to know, like, okay, here's an idea, but how do humans really interact with that idea? Or let's go do some research and interview people and see. You kind of just come back with, hey, I want ABC, and they go, here's ABC.
Yeah.
So that was the experience he was having.
So let me and I want to pause there for a second, because I know that people listening to this are probably thinking, well, wait, does that mean that I can't go to Fiverr or Upwork or TopTal to get that kind of help?
Yeah.
And the answer might be still maybe. It really depends on what you're trying to do.
Right.
But it sounds like the work that you guys offer and the bespoke nature of the type of back end work that you do is important for like a project like what Ricky Williams was doing. And so for him to connect with somebody halfway around the world, there was always going to be something lost in translation.
Yeah.
Whereas when he was able to sit down with you, everything was right there in front of you.
Yeah. And I actually had the privilege of interviewing when he came into Arkansas. We do an event every year, a little bit more about Square Six, as we do Arcapalooza. And so we have remote employees and they all fly into Arkansas sometimes for the first time. And we kind of do an event for a week that's team building and just a time to get together in a remote world, you know. And so I reached out to Ricky and was like, hey, sure, you're super busy, but would you want to come in? And he was like, sure, would love to. And so he comes in and I get to ask him all these questions and talk to him about how we've worked together. And I just recently put that up on LinkedIn, and so it's been really cool to get to.
It's a great video. We'll link to it in the show notes. I really enjoyed that video, watching that.
Great, yeah. So you've seen that. So yeah, so he basically reached out to us, and I think like to the point you were making is if it's a very clear cut solution, then that might work. But in his scenario, it's like I want to help the world with this very abstract idea that I have. How do you actually get that into a mobile app? And that's what he was struggling with, and that's where UX comes in, where it goes, okay, you've got an idea, but you also haven't considered the users and what do those users need and how do they think about astrology and all those kinds of things. So that's really what we helped solve. And he says that in the interview is like, I'd give my ideas to Square Six and then I would get them back even better. And that's really what he's saying is instead of just doing what he said, we would think about it and talk to people and actually solve problems. So if you have this big idea that you don't necessarily know how to get down to a place, that's where I think UX is one of the many ways UX can really help. And one of the things that we offer is just that relationship of going and discovering what people need and what you have. So in Ricky's case, it was he had this certain way of doing astrology, and what people had was they felt lost or needed some direction or something like that. And so we would marry those two up. And that was one of the things we talked about when we first got together. If he was doing that, and he said, no, I'm not, you know, and I think that was one of the selling points is like, that's something that you need to be doing instead of just focusing on because the astrology that he was doing is very hard. Blake can tell you the complex math that they had to do to figure this out because you've got all of these planets moving around. So there's not only a really heavy technical lift that goes into that, but then it's also how do people make sense of this every day? Like how do they actually use this stuff on a day-to-day basis to relate with people in their life through a relationship? So
yeah, you know, and I was, man, just sitting here listening to this, it's like my head is spinning a mile a minute thinking about just that interaction. And I know people that are listening to this are thinking, yeah, but that just sounds way out of my league.
Yeah.
How can the average listener here that may actually have a really good idea right here in our own backyard somewhere, they could be in Siloam for all we know, but they could be in Bentonville, Fayetteville, Rogers, or Springdale, or fill in a blank any other town in Northwest Arkansas. How do they reconcile that and recognize that that they have an idea, but then, kind of figuring out whether or not it's even affordable to get it off the ground.
Yeah. I think a good framework for that is another acronym, which is MVP. And so that stands for minimal viable product.
Yeah.
And so in technology, that's a great way to approach any idea because technology can be very expensive. And so I think that's the way, when people come to us and they have an idea, a lot of times it's a big idea. Just like Ricky's idea was really big. And it's that's one of the things we talked about is how do we get that all the way scaled back to the minimal viable product? What's the least amount of things we can build in order to bring the most amount of value for a user, which is a bit counterintuitive on the business side, but that's also where we're not looking to just do a big project and leave. We're looking to do the MVP and then iterate because we know that we're going to get feedback from users. And this is all part of that UX process, which is you do the research, you figure out what that minimum viable product is that'll solve a pain point, and then you go put it out. And then you get feedback and you listen. And typically what it is what you think's important is not necessarily what's important to the user. Right. And so then you just listen to the user and you go, oh, and we did this with Ricky and somebody that would come to us. That's what we would suggest is take that big idea that you have and then shrink it down and just figure out how does it fit in the marketplace? How can it really bring value for somebody? And then that's going to be really where you need to focus. And then you go get the funding or you do whatever you need to get that thing built. And then you just iterate. And that's that kind of agile, iterative process that we go through. And that's really the most responsible way to build technology and to solve problems. So,
yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I know people would probably think, oh, well, Ricky Williams has a much bigger pocketbook than I do. Or he doesn't have a pocketbook, but he has a wallet. But and so it doesn't take that much.
Right.
A lot of times when I've talked to people about doing an MVP or just getting it out there, sometimes it's MVP also stands for just do it. Just get something out there into the hands as opposed to into the hands of your potential consumer. Because without that, you'll never know if this was actually a really good idea or not.
Yep.
And so many of the most used apps that are out there in the app market, and I'm just speaking specifically of apps, were, originated as MVPs for people to see, hey, does this work? Can I use this? Can I make sense of that? And that's something that, you don't always see. And so I encourage people to definitely take the time to get something out, to ship something, as they say, and see what happens. And start small and then, grow from there.
Yeah. And there's also like even a step before building technology, you can do a lot of things manually.
Yeah.
And so we see that a lot, whether it's whatever, spreadsheet, phone calls, virtual assistant, like there's all kinds of different ways to solve a problem. And then once you solve it and you go, okay, there's a real problem, people are willing to pay for it. Well, then that kind of way to get it built becomes a lot more simple because you've got revenue, you've got people that are willing to pay for this service because it's such a value add. And I think that's what we've seen in technology is there's these big solutions, that can do a lot of things kind of well. And now we're getting more bespoke where it's like, I see this very specific problem and I want to go solve that. And it's so simple that people are really interested in it.
So I want to piggyback on something that it's a story that I heard. I had heard some variation of it before, but I heard the whole story recently. And it's the story of Walt Disney and his brother. When Walt Disney in 1955 went right before he opened or was planning to open Walt Disneyland, which is in Anaheim, he spent time with an amazing artist for a weekend. It was right before his brother was scheduled to go to New York to convince ABC to invest in what he was doing, because without that investment, Disneyland would have never happened. And, Walt Disney had promised ABC a bunch of different things, the least of which was that he was going to do a regular show to just talk about the brand of Disney and to kind of ingratiate himself to the general public around this whole idea of this Disneyland that was supposed to be this amusement park. Because back in the day, amusement parks were seen as kind of seedy and not really that's not like a thing that we really want to invest in, right? These are basically companies of families that move from one town to the next. And, these things kind of fly off the hinges and all that. So, he had a lot of obstacles in front of him. But the thing that he did to convince somebody to give him the money was that he drew it up. And that just kind of lines up with what you just said. Sometimes, and I remember guys talking about like just getting something out there. Sometimes it's easy enough, when you're pitching something or sharing something and putting it out there to put a really good presentation together and show what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes in people seeing that elicits a different response than you just talking about something.
Yeah.
And so when they saw this Disneyland rendition, it was drawn up. It's beautiful. And it was actually sold a while back at an auction, but it was beautiful. And there's pictures of it online, and I'll see if I can find a picture to put on our show notes for this episode. But when you saw it, that's what was taken to New York. And that convinced ABC, the network, to invest in Disneyland. Because ABC was, at that time, that was just only 3 networks, CBS, NBC, and ABC. ABC was the stepchild of the 3 major networks.
Okay.
And they leveraged Disney to catapult into the first position eventually. But it started out with the Disney World program, which I remember growing up on. I don't know how old you are, but, I'm 54, and I remember growing up every Sunday night watching Walt Disney, the show, and the Mouseketeers and all that good stuff. But the bottom line was he took what was in his head, put it on paper, and the minute that he did that, it translated all of what he was trying to do to other people.
Yep.
And then from there, people were like, yeah, that actually does look amazing. That doesn't look anything like any of the amusement parks that I've ever seen.
Yep.
We need to figure something out. And it was one of the greatest bets ever made because, you see Disneyland, you see Walt Disney World commercials every day, right? The amount of money that they're getting, and it's just amazing the number of people that have crossed the threshold of all of those parks. You've got Walt Disney World in Japan. You've got it in China. It's just, it's everywhere, right? And all of that came on the heels of this one piece of artwork that was drawn up to capture the minds of an investor, that to show them that, hey, this is real, this could happen.
Yeah.
And I think, that just kind of lines up with what you were just sharing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in our world, it's tools, like we build all kinds of technology. So, website tools, enterprise level tools, all of that kind of stuff. But the phone really is the incredible kind of revolution because it's in your pocket and it's a tool and it's got so many things that it can do. It's just like what you're saying. When you put a tool in somebody's hand, that's really the difference maker. And when it solves a problem for them, and I think it's kind of a little bit different from the Walt Disney story where they needed like a photo and a picture to kind of help people understand. You have this thing that becomes part of your daily life or this thing that you're using to accomplish some goal. That's when I think it really becomes real to people. And people are willing to invest in that because we're just getting augmented by technology more and more every day. And so any kind of pain point or any kind of solution that you can have or any kind of information that you can provide in any kind of way, there's so many niche places. That's where we see a lot is just these underserved industries or these niche kind of things that people know about or businesses have problems in. And then you can go create a solution, and a niche in a world our size can be a big market.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be a huge market.
Yeah.
So, And so you're always just you just never know who's going to knock on your door with the next greatest idea, right? Because literally one idea could change the trajectory of things. And all of a sudden we're talking about that little small startup in Siloam Springs that is now employing 1,000 people. And you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's like little things you think, it's like you don't have to be a chicken processing plant. There are other things. And I think that's the other piece of it for Northwest Arkansas specifically is that we have become a fertile ground for developing new entrepreneurial talent, a fertile ground of business ideas, and a culture that embraces that. That's why that 1 Million Cups program is so important, right? Because you never know who's going to stand up in front of you on a Wednesday morning and talk about their business. And they may be small now, but tomorrow they may be huge.
Yeah, Chris has had a pretty good saying for it. It's like the modern day gold rush. There's so many ideas, so much opportunity, and there's so many people that only know about that opportunity.
Right.
And like to your point, it's just a matter of building the tool and doing it, And what's fun is people have a lot of grace for technology and they love being part of the process. If you invite users in as like beta users, they become evangelists for the project. And then whenever they're giving feedback and you're making changes and they see that, then there's ownership there, right? It's a great symbiotic relationship where it's like, we need you and you need us and we're in this together. And that's probably one of the funnest parts of those kind of entrepreneurial projects. And then everything up to enterprise, there's enterprises that need things to get done and they need to get outside of their wheelhouse to get them done. And that's also fun because then you have the employees and they have a business problem. And then when you solve that, it's like a really beautiful thing to go, man, I don't have to do this on my everyday grind. We solved this thing, So it's cool on both ends of the spectrum to see those solutions come together.
Well, so tell me, for anybody listening right now that's like, man, this Justin, I really understand what he's saying and I have some ideas that I'm trying to get going. How do you entertain the public when it comes to opportunities, or what's the process for anyone listening to this that says, I've got something that I've just been hitting my head against the wall with, but it sounds like what Justin and Square Six is doing could help me out. How does that work?
Yeah, so you can always start with our website, which is just square6six.com, or you can email me, if you're local.
Go ahead and give your email address.
Yeah, it's justin.johnson@square6.com.
There you go.
So always up to get coffee, lunch if you're local. I mean, that's kind of how we met. It's like, there's nothing better than just getting together and talking. We're open to talk to anybody about anything, and so I think that's been one of the coolest parts is just being, that's not always the case. We've had other people come to us and go, man, there's just something different about you guys. You don't speak over our head or use acronyms and jargon. That can be kind of the standard in the software development world. And so I think that's been one of our biggest differentiators is we're all kind of from this area and grown up in this area. And people just say, man, you guys are really relatable. You're easy to talk to. You seem honest, and like we'll have hard conversations if they're to be had. So yeah, that's kind of how we engage with people is we're just an open book and we're happy to talk about whatever your problem or pain point is.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about, did you grow up here in Northwest Arkansas?
I was about an hour south in Fort Smith.
Okay, that's right. Yeah, you did say that. So what are your thoughts about Northwest Arkansas as it stands today? I mean...
Yeah, it's a gold mine. It's just a gem. We vacationed to Colorado, and that was kind of my dream, was to move to Colorado, me and my wife. And when COVID hit, I was like, I'm one email away, babe. Like, we could go to Colorado right now. But we had already moved to Northwest Arkansas, and we had been here for a couple of years. And the more we talked about it, we just said, we have everything here that we want. And our playground is the Buffalo. We live in Springdale. We live right on 412. 45 minutes, us and the kids can be in the Buffalo. And it's been different when it was just me and her, and now it's with our kids. And what a great place to raise kids. What an amazing place, how easy it is to get outside. So to me, it's like, I can't imagine a better mix. And where we landed was we're never going anywhere. We may go places, but this is home base.
Okay. I love that. So where do you like to go break bread when you are up for a good meal and you're not going to eat at home?
Ooh, my favorite thing to do, I like variety. So I go to like every new place I can find in Springdale, and there seems to always be a new one, or Bentonville, Fayetteville. I just happen to live there. So our regular thing is to go try out a new El Salvadorian restaurant.
Okay. Okay.
And we have one right down the road from us called La Mangalada. And it's been sweet to go there over and over and over and just kind of be part of the community. When we walk in, the lady knows us. She knows where we're going to sit. She knows our kids. So, yeah, that's been really cool. Other than that, I'm always hitting whatever the new ramen shop is. Or I'm a bit of a foodie, but I just kind of, I go whatever new place I haven't tried. Yeah.
And since you're in Siloam, what's your favorite ice cream spot there?
Oh, Pure Joy. Yeah. Yeah. We're next
That was
door.
a setup. We already talked about that. Yeah. So I'm here to tell anybody that's listening, when you're in Siloam or if you're driving through Siloam to Tulsa, just take a quick detour into downtown Siloam. And as a matter of fact, your office is right near Pure Joy,
next
right?
Door. Yeah,
it's next door. Yeah, your neighbors.
Not good for the waistline.
It is not good for the waistline. Their ice cream is, and they have non-dairy versions, but it's phenomenal.
Yep.
Pure Joy it literally is that.
The goat cheese is worth trying. Every time I tell somebody, they're like, no, I go, just sample it.
Just
sample
try it. Yeah.
So
That's awesome. Fun. I love that. And that's the thing I love about Northwest Arkansas. Everywhere you go, there's a little something that's special about it. So whether it's Siloam or on the other side, Eureka, or up in Bella Vista, just all around, there's so many cool little places that you just wouldn't know unless you get out and see it.
Yep. And you just never run out of new places to go. Every weekend, my wife is like, hey, I found a new park for us to go to. We have 3 kids now, so that's the majority of our...
Of course.
Yeah. Or we're at Still Creek on the Buffalo, and it's like, this is beautiful. This is stunningly beautiful. No matter where you went in the world, it's just amazing.
I love it. Well, man, I'm so excited, Justin, to have you on and for you just to kind of share some of your wisdom and knowledge and experience at Square Six, and certainly I'm rooting for you, and I'm rooting for your colleagues, Chris and Blake, and the work that they're doing at Square Six, and certainly just let us know how we can continue to help you as you expand. And hey, I'm going to be hitting you up, man, when you guys get to Mark Zuckerberg level, and you guys hit that one opportunity that just changes everything. So, but no, seriously though, I'm rooting for you guys and all your endeavors. And I want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your story with our audience.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, folks, there you have it. Another episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. To learn more about us or to read or download the show notes from today's episode and learn how you can get connected with Square Six and all the amazing things that Justin Johnson is doing and the rest of his team, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. You can listen to this podcast and sign up for our free newsletter to keep up with us and all things NWA. Make sure you sign up today. And don't forget, you can follow the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast wherever you listen to it. And please, please, please consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. Our podcast comes out every Monday, rain or shine. I'm your host, Randy Wilburn, and we'll see you back here next week for another new episode of the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of I Am Northwest Arkansas. Check us out each and every week, available anywhere that great podcasts can be found. For show notes or more information on becoming a guest, visit IamNorthwestArkansas.com. We'll see you next week on I Am Northwest Arkansas.